The Hamburg studio was quiet except for the hum of equipment. It was February 1998. Thomas Anders and Dieter Bohlen sat across from each other for the first time in over 10 years, not as enemies, not yet as partners. Just two men considering whether to resurrect something they destroyed. The reunion talks had been going well. Surprisingly well. Both had achieved success separately. Both had proven they could exist without the other, but neither had recreated what modern talking had been, that specific magic, that unrepeatable chemistry. The conversation had covered practical matters. Publishing rights, tour logistics, which songs to remake, how to present the reunion to the press, standard business. Then Dieter had stood up, walked to a locked cabinet in the corner of the studio, retrieved a cassette tape that looked old, worn. The label was handwritten, faded. But Thomas could make out the words, "The Last Goodbye, 1987, never release." Dieter held the tape for a moment, then said, "Before we agree to this reunion, there's something you need to hear, something I wrote 10 years ago, something I've never played for anyone." He inserted the tape into the player. Press play, and for the next 4 minutes and 12 seconds, Thomas Anders listened to a song that would change everything he thought he understood about their breakup. Before understanding why that song mattered, you need to understand what happened in 1987. Modern talking had been at their absolute peak, multiple number, one hits across Europe, sold out tours in countries where German music rarely penetrated, their faces on every magazine, television appearances, radio dominance. They were young, successful, living the dream they'd both worked toward, on top of the world. But beneath the success, beneath the smiles for cameras and the coordinated dance moves, the partnership had been fracturing. What had started as creative differences had metastasized into personal conflicts. Dieter's need for complete control had clashed violently with Thomas's growing desire for artistic input. Every decision became a battle, every song a negotiation, every interview a careful performance of unity that both men knew was fiction. By mid-1987, both were exhausted, not from the work itself. They could handle the touring, the recording, the constant publicity. What they couldn't handle was fighting each other every single day. The official breakup announcement came in June 1987. Carefully worded, professional, corporate. Modern Talking has decided to pursue separate projects to explore individual artistic visions. The press speculated wildly. Fans were devastated. Thousands wrote letters begging them to reconsider. But neither Dieter nor Thomas explained the real reason, that they couldn't stand to be in the same room anymore without arguing, that the partnership had become toxic. That continuing would have destroyed them both psychologically. That what looked like a professional decision was actually an act of self-preservation. Dieter threw himself into new projects immediately. Blue System, production work for other artists, collaborations, songwriting for hire, constant activity, anything to avoid thinking about what he'd lost, anything to prove he didn't need Thomas Anders. That Modern Talking's success had been his creation, and he could replicate it without that particular voice. Thomas pursued his solo career, slower, more thoughtful, more careful, trying to figure out who he was without Modern Talking defining him, trying to establish an identity separate from the voice of Modern Talking. Both men told themselves they were fine. Both men threw themselves into work. Both men avoided dealing with the emotional reality of what the breakup meant. But 3 months after the breakup, alone in his studio at 2 a.m., Dieter Bohlen did something he'd never done before, something completely out of character. He stopped trying to prove anything, stopped calculating commercial viability, stopped thinking about chart positions or radio play, and he wrote from pure emotion. The song was called The Last Goodbye. It started with a simple piano melody. No synthesizers, no drum machines, no production tricks, just piano. Then Dieter's voice, rough, unpolished, without the layers of studio magic he typically used to perfect every note. Singing lyrics that were brutally, devastatingly honest. What built a castle made of sound, but castles fall when cracks are found. I wanted you to need my way, Dara. You wanted me to hear you say, the things I never let you speak, spheres the strength I mistook for weak. Now silence fills the space between, the best partnership I've ever seen. The chorus was devastating in its simplicity. This is the last goodbye, jeers, to the only thing that made me try to be more than what I am, Guy. This is the last goodbye, T, and I'm the reason why. Dieter had recorded the entire song in one take. No edits. No perfectionism, just raw emotional confession set to music. When he'd finished, he'd sat in the studio and cried, not from sadness exactly, from release, from finally admitting what he couldn't admit anywhere else. that he'd destroyed modern talking, that his need for control had killed the best thing he'd ever been part of. That Thomas hadn't been wrong. Dieter had been. He'd labeled the cassette immediately. Never release. Because releasing it would mean admitting fault publicly, would mean acknowledging that the breakup wasn't mutual, that it was his failure, his ego, his inability to see Thomas as a partner rather than an instrument. The song sat in that locked cabinet for 11 years, untouched, unheard, a confession that existed only for Dieter, a reminder of what pride cost. Now, in February 1998, with Thomas Anders sitting 3 feet away, Dieter was playing it. Letting Thomas hear something he'd never shared with anyone, the vulnerability in Dieter's voice on the recording was shocking. Thomas had worked with Dieter for years, had never heard him sound like that. Uncertain, broken, genuine. The lyrics detailed every mistake Dieter had made, every time he'd dismissed Thomas's input, every moment he'd treated the partnership as hierarchy rather than collaboration. It was an apology, a confession, a eulogy for something that had died because Dieter hadn't known how to let it live. When the song ended, the studio was silent. Thomas sat motionless, processing. Dieter didn't move, didn't speak, just waited. Finally, Thomas asked, "When did you write this?" September 1987, 3 months after we split. "Why are you playing it for me now?" Dieter looked directly at Thomas. "Because if we're going to do this reunion, you need to know that I understand what I did, that I've spent 10 years knowing I destroyed something that mattered, that this time will be different." Thomas listened, then asked, "Why did you never release it?" "Because it would have meant admitting I was wrong, and I wasn't ready to do that publicly." "Are you ready now?" Dieter considered this. "No, but I'm ready to admit it to you. That has to be enough." They sat in silence. Then Thomas said something unexpected. "We can never release this song?" Dieter looked surprised. "Why not?" "Because if we do, it becomes product. Another song, another revenue stream. Right now, it's something else. It's truth. The moment we release it, it stops being truth and becomes marketing." Dieter understood immediately. Thomas was protecting the song, protecting what it represented. By keeping it unreleased, it remained genuine, a private acknowledgement between two people who'd hurt each other and were trying to move past it. "Okay," Dieter agreed. "This stays between us. We never release it. We never talk about it publicly. This is ours, not modern talking's. Ours!" They shook hands on it. "A promise. A pact." The reunion moved forward. Modern Talking released Back for Good in 1998, massive success. Fans embraced the return. For 5 years, Modern Talking 2.0 worked. Better than the first time. Not because the music was better, because the partnership was better. Dieter had learned to listen. Thomas had learned to assert himself. The balance they'd lacked in the 1980s, they'd found in the late 1990s, and underneath it all was the last goodbye. Never released, never mentioned, but always there. A reminder of why they'd failed before, a commitment to not fail again. But in 2003, as Modern Talking was falling apart for the second time, as the same old tensions resurfaced in new forms, Thomas Anders made a request that would reignite everything. They were in the studio, working on what would become their final sessions together. Tensions had been building again, different tensions than 1987, but equally destructive. Not about control this time, about direction. About whether they still had anything new to say. About whether they were creating or just repeating. About whether the reunion had been artistic necessity or commercial calculation. The magic that had sustained them from 1998 to 2002 was fading. Both felt it. Neither wanted to admit it. Thomas had brought up the song during a break. Wish should release The Last Goodbye. Dieter had looked at him like he'd suggested something obscene, something that violated everything they'd agreed upon. We agreed. That song stays private. That was the deal. That was 5 years ago. Things are different now. We're different. Things are exactly the same. We're ending again, just like before. Same pattern, same failure. That's exactly why we should release it. Let people understand what Modern Talking actually was. Not just the hits and the image, the struggle, the human part, the real part. Dieter had been adamant, unmoving. No, that song was a confession, not a product, not content, not something to be packaged and sold. The minute we release it, we're selling what should be sacred. We're commodifying the one genuine thing we've kept from this entire circus. Nothing about Modern Talking is sacred anymore. Thomas had said bitterly. The words hung in the air heavy. True. That's where you're wrong, Dieter had responded quietly. That song is. It's the only thing we've kept genuine. Everything else we've commodified. Every hit, every reunion, every comeback, every interview, every performance. All of it has been turned into product. But not that. That's real. And real is the only thing we have left that means anything. It's the only thing that proves we were human beings in this, not just brand assets. And if we sell it, we lose that proof. They'd argued for 2 hours, back and forth, circling the same points. Thomas's position was that releasing the song would give their legacy depth, would show they'd been real people struggling with real conflicts, that the glossy pop exterior had hidden genuine artistic struggle. That transparency was valuable. That honesty mattered more than mystique. Dieter's position was that some things shouldn't be sold, that keeping the song private was the only way to preserve its meaning, that the moment it became part of their catalog, it would be reduced to just another track, just another piece of intellectual property to be licensed to commercials, repackaged in greatest hits collections, and exploited for revenue. That sacred required boundaries. That not everything could be shared without losing what made it valuable in the first place. Neither convinced the other. And in the heat of that argument, both realized something. They were done, not just disagreeing, fundamentally incompatible in their views about what their art meant. Thomas wanted transparency, authenticity above all, even if it meant exposing vulnerability. Dieter wanted mystery, boundaries between public and private. Some things kept sacred even if that meant less authentic public image. Modern talking ended for the second time shortly after. The press statement was similar to 1987. Modern Talking has decided to end their partnership, professional, revealing nothing. Thomas and Dieter went their separate ways. Again. But The Last Goodbye remained, still unreleased, still locked in Dieter's studio. A song that represented everything complicated about Modern Talking. It was Dieter's most honest work, his most vulnerable moment captured on tape. It was also the thing he refused to share, the line he wouldn't cross even for commercial success. Over the years, rumors started. Music industry people who'd been in Dieter's studio sometimes mentioned hearing something unusual. A demo. A song that didn't sound like Modern Talking, but was clearly related to it. Fans started speculating online. Was there unreleased material? Lost tracks from the archives? The speculation grew, especially after Dieter's death. And actually, Dieter Bohlen is still alive as of 2025. Let me reframe. As both men aged, the question became more pressing: would the song ever surface? Would someone in their estates eventually find it and release it? Would it be lost forever? In interviews, when asked about unreleased Modern Talking material, both men gave the same answer. Everything worth releasing has been released. It was technically true. The Last Goodbye wasn't worth releasing in the commercial sense. Its value was personal, private, not for sale. Thomas kept his copy of the tape. Dieter kept the original. Both had agreed never to digitize it, never to let it exist in a format that could be easily copied or leaked. Analog only, cassette only, as fragile as the moment it represented. Sometimes Thomas would listen to it, usually late at night, usually when he was reflecting on his career, on what Modern Talking had meant. The song always hit him the same way, made him remember that beneath all the conflict, there had been genuine partnership, genuine creation, genuine feeling. Dieter listened less frequently, but when he did, it reminded him of his own capacity for growth, that the person who'd written that song in 1987 had been capable of change, had changed, had learned to be a better partner. Even if the partnership hadn't ultimately survived, the song was proof that failure could be generative, that acknowledging mistakes could lead to something better, even if better didn't last forever. The truth about The Last Goodbye is that it probably shouldn't exist at all, not as a commercial product, not as a leaked demo. It should remain what it is, a private artifact of two people who created something beautiful together, destroyed it through their own flaws, tried again and failed again, but who, in between, had a moment of genuine understanding. The song is that moment, preserved in analog, protected from commodification, sacred in the only way art can be sacred anymore. By refusing to be sold, there's something poetic about Modern Talking, a duo that sold millions of records, having one song that will never be sold, one piece of their catalog that exists only for them, that fans will never hear, that critics will never review, that streaming services will never monetize. In an industry where everything eventually gets released, remastered, repackaged, and resold, The Last Goodbye remains unreleased. And both Thomas and Dieter seem content with that, because some things matter more than commercial success. Some confessions are too important to become content, but the question remains, where is the tape now? Thomas has stated in interviews that he keeps his copy in a safe. Dieter has never disclosed where the original is stored. Some speculate it's been destroyed. Others believe it's in a vault somewhere, waiting. For what? No one knows. Maybe for a moment when both men are gone and the decision about release falls to someone else. Maybe to remain hidden forever. The mystery has become part of the legend. Modern Talking fans debate constantly. Does the song really exist? If it does, what does it sound like? Would it live up to the mythology that's grown around it? Some fans have tried to recreate it based on descriptions. Others have created elaborate theories about why it's being hidden. Is there some legal reason, some contractual obligation, or is it simply what Dieter and Thomas say it is? A private acknowledgement that they wanted to keep private? In 2015, a supposed leak surfaced online, someone claiming to have a copy of The Last Goodbye. Fans analyzed it extensively, concluded it was fake. The piano playing didn't match Dieter's style. The lyrics didn't align with what little was known. It was wishful thinking. Someone trying to profit from the legend. Both Dieter and Thomas confirmed it was fake, but in doing so, they also confirmed something else. The real song still existed. They knew what it sounded like, and this wasn't it. That confirmation reignited interest. If they knew it was fake, they must have the real version. Where? How? Could it ever be released? In 2020, during an interview about Modern Talking's legacy, a journalist asked Thomas directly, "Will The Last Goodbye ever be released?" Thomas had smiled. "It already has been. Dieter and I both heard it. That's release enough. But what about the fans? The fans have everything else. They have dozens of albums, hundreds of songs, millions of moments from Modern Talking. This one moment isn't theirs. This one is ours. And that's okay. Not everything needs to be shared. It was a radical position in an age where artists share everything behind the scenes footage, demos, rough cuts. Every part of the creative process documented and monetized. But Thomas and Dieter had chosen differently, had drawn a line, had said this far and no further. There's something almost defiant about it. Modern Talking giving nothing to their fans except this one thing. This one song that represents their most honest moment, their most vulnerable admission, and keeping it for themselves. It changes how you think about their entire catalog. All those songs you can listen to anytime. You're My Heart, You're My Soul, Brother Louie, Cherry Cherry Lady, they're great, they're classics. But they're not The Last Goodbye. They're products carefully crafted, designed for maximum commercial impact. The Last Goodbye is art, raw, unpolished, true. And maybe that's why it can't be released. Because once it enters the marketplace, it becomes just another product, just another track, just another asset to be exploited. By keeping it locked away, Dieter and Thomas have preserved the only thing in their entire partnership that wasn't about commerce. The only thing that was purely about two people trying to understand each other, failing again, but having in between a moment of genuine connection. The song is that connection, and maybe connection is too valuable to sell. So where does that leave us? With a mystery that will probably never be solved, with a song that probably shouldn't be heard, with a story about two artists who created magic together, destroyed it, recreated it, and destroyed it again, but who, somewhere in the middle of all that destruction, created something they agreed was too important to share. Whether The Last Goodbye ever surfaces doesn't really matter. Its existence is enough. The knowledge that Dieter Bohlen, master of commercial pop, wrote one song that he refused to commercialize. That Thomas Anders, who built his career on his voice being heard, agreed that some things are more powerful unheard. That Modern Talking, the ultimate commercial success story, has one piece of their legacy that will never be commodified. That's the real story, not the song itself. But what the song represents? The human cost of partnership. The private pain beneath public success, the acknowledgement that failure can be as meaningful as triumph if you're honest about it, and the choice to keep that honesty private, even when sharing it could be profitable, even when fans demand it, even when the market wants it. The Last Goodbye will probably remain unreleased, hidden, protected, a secret between two people who spent decades in the public eye, and maybe that's perfect. Maybe every partnership needs something that belongs only to the people in it. Something that can't be sold, can't be shared, can't be reduced to content. Modern Talking's legacy is complicated. Commercial success and artistic compromise, creative brilliance and personal conflict, partnership and competition. But underneath all of it is one song, 4 minutes and 12 seconds of honesty. That exists. That matters. That will never be heard. And maybe that's the most Modern Talking thing possible, creating something beautiful. and refusing to let it be consumed.